Thank you again for joining us at Ascend Legal 101. Today, I'm joined by Chris Grew, who is a debt consultant with 4 Pillars Consulting. And today we're going to talk about what I see a lot of my clients. They walk in the door, there's a lot going on, they think they need a new job, when in fact they have debt collectors calling them all the time, or there's financial pressure. And of course, I'm not qualified to counsel them or to talk to them about that, solving those financial problems. I can get them a new job or coach them through different kinds of things. So this is why I've asked Chris to join me today, because he's the guy, he's qualified, and he's going to help me walk through the process so that I know what I'm talking about when people walk in the door. So thank you for joining me today, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Ramona. Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and also about 4 Pillars?
Certainly. My background is finance. I spent 28 years in auto finance at various dealerships around Southern Vancouver Island. And I started back in the day when there was no such thing as non-prime, which means we only lent to people that had good credit. Towards the end of my career, we started up these non-prime lending sites because there was such a need for that. People have had bad credit, they needed to get finance for automobiles. So I started looking at, who would you lend money to if they all had bad credit, which are the best ones to lend money to? And I kept coming back to these people that had filed consumer proposals because they basically had a mindset where they realized they needed to do something about their situation. They were proactive about their circumstances. They reached out and found a company like 4 Pillars that deals with that, and filed a consumer proposal which resolved their bad debts. And that person, in my mind, was a good person to lend money to because they were all cleared up, and second, they were probably very desirous of building their credit and would not miss any payments, and we found that to be true. So we began lending to these people, and as I kind of dovetailed out of my banking career or my finance career, I wanted to find out how these people were filing these consumer proposals, and that led me to finding 4 Pillars. That was about 11 years ago, and I liked 4 Pillars philosophy, or their mission statement, if you will. They're all about helping people. We're all about representing the debtor and protecting that person's rights, and it dovetailed nicely with my feelings in life is I need to help other people. In order to get what I want out of life, I help other people get what they want out of life. And so we ended up becoming involved with 4 Pillars, and my wife Maria and I have been for the last 11 years. And so what 4 Pillars is a debt restructuring company. I believe it's the largest debt restructuring company in Canada. We have offices right from Victoria to Halifax, and we've been in business, I think, heading into our 20th year now. So we've been around a while and have a good track record. Yeah, so that's what 4 Pillars does, and that's kind of my background.
Can I ask you a quick question before we get into sort of any consumer financial protection? What's the difference between credit counseling or a credit counselor and a licensed bankruptcy, insolvency? I'm sure I got that wrong, but you know what I mean.
You're close.
Trustee.
Yes.
Trustee.
They just changed their title in the last couple of years. They used to be known as trustees in bankruptcy. They're now called LITs, licensed insolvency trustees. So they kind of got rid of the term bankruptcy out of their title for the obvious reason, negative connotation.
Right.
So a licensed insolvency trustee is a trustee in bankruptcy, and that person represents the creditors in a process of insolvency. Whereas you asked the difference, I'm a debt consultant, which means I'm not a licensed insolvency trustee. If I was, I couldn't have a debtor as my client because I can't be the servant of 2 masters. I can't represent the creditors and the debtors at the same time. So I represent the debtor. 4 Pillars is the only company in Canada that solely represents the debtors.
That's really interesting because I think I knew, it's sort of from my legal days, people think when they're getting a mortgage that their lawyer is representing them, when in fact the lawyer represents the bank. So it was the same kind of thing with bankruptcy trustees is that you think they're representing you when in fact they're representing the debt collector, the creditor.
Right.
Right. So there are a couple of tools that I found online in doing some background research about federal consumer financial protection and provincial consumer financial protection. Can you speak a little bit about that? And
it's not really in my wheelhouse, Ramona, but I did do a little research because you sent me, of course, what we were going to talk about. And I found the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. I found their website and I wasn't aware that this exists, but it looks like it's a tool that ensures federally regulated financial entities comply with consumer protection measures, promotes financial education, and raises consumers' awareness of their rights and responsibilities. So it looks like it's a resource that consumers can click into and see what, for example, what is a collection agency legally able to do, and where you could file a complaint if they were in violation of that. I get people saying to me, they're harassing me. Why do you say that? Well, they're calling me 8 times a day. Okay, did you answer the phone? No. Well, then how do they know you're even hearing the phone ring? It's not harassment until you answer the phone 8 times. Now we have harassment. But if you pick up the phone and tell them what you're doing, they may stop calling you. But at the very least, you've let them know. And then, so it's these types of things. Can a debt collector call my work? And the answer is yes. They can call your work once to ask if you're still working there, but they can't disclose the reason they're calling. And once they've done that, they're technically not supposed to call your work ever again. So these are the things that you can find out on the websites.
Right. Okay. And so what I'll do is in my notes, in the notes, I'll just put links to both the federal and provincial websites so people can look at them if they want those kinds of tools. Are you seeing, first of all, perhaps we should talk about sort of generally what happens when say I'm a new client to you. What do I do? And how do I protect myself? And we're in a pandemic and all hell is breaking loose everywhere. I've lost my job. And now what? What do I do?
So what I would do is start out with a telephone conversation and gather information from that client as to, what their source of income is, what their liabilities are, who they owe money to and how much, what their assets are, whether they own a house or a car or RRSP portfolio, what they have. Based on that, I would then develop a couple of strategies to share with them, whether in a Zoom meeting, as typically what's happening these days. And I start by reviewing options that don't affect their credit rating, which would be desirable. For example, if somebody had a motorhome that was worth $20,000 or $30,000 and they had $20,000 or $30,000 worth of debt or less, I would advise the best course of action would be to sell your asset and pay the debt off and start again. But that would be good advice. Or if somebody was able to qualify for a consolidation loan, this is where we have perhaps a client that has 3 or 4 or 5 different debts, credit cards, lines of credit, overdraft, whatever that might be, and then say they owe $20,000 collectively, I would advise them, if they would qualify, to go to their bank and get a consolidation loan, pay all the creditors off, and just have one $20,000 loan, usually at a lower interest rate than your credit cards or lines of credit would be, and structure that over a period of time that's reasonable, that you can afford the payments. But this way, if it's a term loan, in other words, structured over 5 years or 6 years or even 7 years, at least there's light at the end of the tunnel. When you make that final payment, the debt is gone. Whereas with revolving credit, which is credit cards, lines of credit, overdraft, that type of thing, you can pay the debt down and then use the money again. And this is what typically happens, and how people get into trouble is they never quite seem to be able to get those credit cards and lines of credit paid off. So if somebody could restructure that debt on a term loan, I wouldn't do a line of credit, because line of credit is just another, like a Visa card. Right. But you have a certain number of payments and then they're all paid off. I would do that if they qualify. But typically by the time people are seeing us, they are maxed on everything. They may have missed payments, which will of course tarnish their credit a little bit, which would mean that they probably are not going to qualify for a consolidation loan. So if they've exhausted that possibility, then you get into the area of insolvency. You're talking about a consumer proposal, which is an alternative to bankruptcy. And we cover all of those topics in our meetings. And my goal in our first meeting with our clients is to share with them as much options and as much information as I possibly can, and send them home well-informed to make an intelligent decision. We do not do follow-up with clients. I send out one email after I meet with somebody that says, hey, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact me. But we don't follow up. We're not calling you on the phone and saying, hey, we met last week. What do you want to do? It's up to the client to reach out to us, and that's how if they want to engage your services.
Right. So I suppose too, then, after that initial meeting, a lot of that, when I see people, they walk into my office with this idea that they're ruined. But there has to be a sense of relief, even after the first phone call with you. Oh, I'm not ruined. This is something we can deal with.
Absolutely. I find that people will say that right after the initial meeting, that they're leaving that meeting knowing that there is relief available and they don't have to go bankrupt in most cases, about 99% of the time. We rarely do bankruptcies. Most of it is designed for consumer proposal. Roughly 20,000 consumers or consumer proposals are filed each and every month in Canada. That's a huge number. And about 98% of those are accepted. So it's much preferred to bankruptcy.
And so can you explain to me the difference between a consumer proposal and going bankrupt or a bankruptcy?
Yeah, so bankruptcy is, when you're insolvent, you have no means of making even an offer to your creditors of 20 cents on the dollar or whatever. So you assign yourself in bankruptcy to a trustee, a licensed insolvency trustee. Depending on what your income is, you may be bankrupt for 9 months, and as long as you do perform your duties, which is basically turn in a income and expense statement each month, attend 2 credit counseling sessions. Basically, that's it. And then you're discharged. And that will then remain on your credit bureau for 6 years after the date of discharge, which is typically why we hear everybody says, oh, bankruptcy, that's 7 years. So if your income is low, that's nine months, and then you're discharged. If you have a job where you're making more than what's called the exemption amount, so I'll give you an idea. If you're a single person in British Columbia, the amount of your income that is exempt from being realized upon by a trustee in bankruptcy is $2,243. So if your income is less than $2,243, you'll be discharged in 9 months. If you have more income than $2,243, then you have something called surplus income. And surplus income triggers 2 things on the bankruptcy side of the equation, and that is the length of time of bankruptcy. That would be extended to 21 months for a first time bankrupt. It would be 36 months for the second time you've been through. And the trustee's office is entitled to collect, 50% of everything you earn over a 21-month period over and above the exempt amount. So that would be a bankruptcy where it's a kind of a long-term commitment and you're assigning yourself over to the trustee. In a consumer proposal, it's a much shorter term. There's a 45-day voting period. So instead of filing a bankruptcy, you can make an offer of settlement to your creditors based more on what you can afford to pay rather than what you owe. Your creditors will vote on this offer. They get 1 vote for every dollar of debt they hold. So if you, as an example, if you had a BMO MasterCard and you owe $10,000 on it, BMO would have 10,000 votes. If you have an RBC Visa card, they owe $5,000 on, RBC would have 5,000 votes. So at the end of the 45 days, all the creditors vote on the offer based on the number of votes they have. We need to add those up. In order for your proposal to be accepted, you simply need to have a 1% majority. So 51% of the creditors need to accept the offer. And as I said earlier, 98%, these are accepted. So it's much more. And now how they decide whether or not they like this offer is they compare what you've offered to them in a consumer proposal to what you would be worth to them if you went bankrupt. So what I first examine when I meet a client, what I first examine is what their valuation would be in a bankruptcy. So if they're worth 0 cents on the dollar in a bankruptcy, typically debts are settled at around 20 to 25 cents on the dollar relative to the debt. If, however, they're worth 20 cents bankrupt because they do have surplus income or they have assets that are not exempt under the bankruptcy, then you may want to adjust your offer in the consumer proposal and make it a little higher. So if you were 20 cents in a bankruptcy, you might want to offer them 30 cents in a consumer proposal. So the idea is to make them a better offer. And this is why most of them are exempt.
Okay. And then, and the discharge period, so the discharge period is shorter, and I suppose then you would make payments over a period of time to settle that debt.
Correct. Typically, it's over a 60-month period of time. The nice thing about a consumer proposal is it's 0% interest. So every penny you pay goes down to pay down the principal of the balance that you're settling. It's typically structured over 60 months. The debtor has the option being to pay it off without penalty and without question sooner rather than later if they choose to, and many of them do. And the only thing they cannot do is miss 3 payments. If they miss 3 payments on the consumer proposal, then the consumer proposal falls apart. It is no longer way. Okay. The rights of the creditors, the original amounts would be reenacted.
Okay.
Revived.
Is that a court process in the same way a bankruptcy is?
Yeah, it's filed using a licensed insolvency trustee. They are officers of the court, and they file the paperwork on behalf of the debtor in the court system. So in both a bankruptcy and a consumer proposal, the debtor is protected from any action the creditors can take against them, including being sued or garnished or freezing their bank account or that type of thing, or even for that matter, calling them on the phone. A stay of proceedings is issued in either case, and the debtor is then protected from the date of filing and continue to be protected right through the term of the consumer proposal, unless, of course, they miss those 3 payments. If they miss those 3 payments, then the court order, the stay of proceedings that's been protecting them comes down, and the rights of the creditors are revived.
Okay. And are you seeing an increase because of the pandemic in bankruptcies
It's a good question, and you would think the answer would be yes. Anybody in the insolvency industry would be busy with people being out of work and people, probably living a little more in their credit than they have been in the past because of lower income. But the answer is no. Our numbers, and I've talked to our colleagues across the country and also trustee offices, and they're saying that their numbers are down 20 to 30%. So it's kind of an odd reaction, but I think it will affect us in the next decade, that we will be busier and busier and busier because of the result of what's happened in the past year.
And so if I wanted to come see you, so you're a debt consultant. I wouldn't come see you as a bankruptcy, or as a trustee. I'm just going to call it a trustee from here on in. I'm not even going to mention the B word. So how do you help me in a way that's different than going to see a trustee?
So I would describe it as if you were getting a divorce, would you go to your husband's lawyer and say, can you represent me as well? What's a good deal for me in this situation? Right. But he's being paid, by your husband, right? So probably you're not going to get that unbiased advice. Whereas if you hired your own lawyer, then you have he has your best interest at heart. So that is what I do, is I protect my clients' assets and structure proposals as cheaply as I can to get my clients out of debt as low as I can, but in such a way that also the creditors will accept the offer. And so I've been fairly successful at doing that. I think in my 11 years, I've had 1 proposal that I wasn't able to get accepted. So a little better than a 98% average.
Right. I actually, because also you mentioned at the beginning that you came from financing, the auto financing. I noticed when I was doing my research in the federal website that car companies or vehicle debts are different or are treated differently. And can you explain that to me and why that is?
Sure. You have 2 different types of debt. You have secured debt, which would be a car loan. So the bank or the lender has an asset that they can take away from the debtor in the event that they don't make their payments. That's a secured debt. And then what we deal with is unsecured debt. So as I mentioned earlier, credit cards, lines of credit that are not secured against a home, even Revenue Canada debt, income tax debt is unsecured debt. Student loans that are older than 7 years, anything that doesn't have an asset attached to it is unsecured debt.
Okay, I understand now. I thought, work in the system, right? And I noticed on your website, and for people who have who may be in, you know, really considering some of these options, I really recommend going to Chris's website at 4 Pillars VI or 4 Pillars Victoria. You can just Google that. A couple of things I found on your website that I found really helpful. The first is when you first go on the website, it says, "Let's stop the bleeding." And I was like, wow, that's intense, but really on point. But you also have a blog, and some of it is a little bit older. But there is one article on your blog called 8 Lies. You know, I forget the whole title, but you know, all the things you thought were true that aren't.
Yeah,
And
8 lies that you've been told about your debt, right?
yes. And when I read that, I was actually really, I thought, oh yeah, I've heard all of this, and I believed it.
Mm.
And so what I didn't, can you speak to me a little bit about how credit companies will sell debt to other companies, and that sort of gives you, I don't want to say additional leverage, but you know, there, it's like a whole different shoot and match. And I think people don't generally know about that kind of thing.
Right. So typically, if a debtor is unable to make payments on a line of credit or a credit card, that company will try for the 60 to 90-day period to collect on their own. After about 90 days, they will sell that debt. So it's actually an asset. So the debtor doesn't own the debt, the creditor owns the debt. And that debt is now an asset that they can actually sell to a collection agency. And collection agencies will buy that debt for sometimes 30 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar. So the bank will redeem some of the money and write the rest off, of course. And now your debt belongs to the collection agency. These people are very aggressive, and they're very good at their jobs, and they're very intimidating. And their goal is to collect, of course, the original amount of the debt plus the ridiculous interest they're going to now continue to charge. And so when they can, if they can get you to make a settlement offer with them anywhere near the original value or even 50%, they're still making a profit because they bought the debt at 20 to 30 cents on the dollar.
Wow. Boy, that's significant.
Mm.
I didn't know that. I think you've gone through what I thought were my big questions. What I did want to ask you about was business restructuring and credit rebuilding. So I suppose if I went to a trustee, I wouldn't, you know, you have to go to a couple of debt counseling sessions or something like that. But you also help your clients restructure their businesses. This would be a perfect time for that kind of business, or rebuilding their credit. Can you tell me a little bit about how you go through that?
So, yeah. So once you restructure, whether it's a corporation or it's a personal debt, you restructure the debt, and let's say you file a consumer proposal, that's going to damage that person's credit bureau. It's going to create something called an R7 on the credit bureau. And in order to reestablish credit or rebuild credit, the irony is you need to actually borrow money and start paying it back. So we talked about non-prime lending earlier. This is what we were doing when I was leaving the finance world, is helping people rebuild their credit by getting them, for example, a car loan. You can get a secured Visa card. 4 Pillars has credit rebuilding partners that marry up to us. That do things like secured loans. We have an insurance policy that insures your proposal if you can't go to work because you become sick or involved in an accident, or you lose your job. The insurance company makes the monthly payment on the proposal, and that is structured as a loan for insurance, and so that actually gets reported in the credit bureau as well. So that is a unique product that only 4 Pillars has. I believe that's true. So these are small little baby steps that you take in the first couple of years after your proposal has been accepted. So we don't have to wait until the proposal has been paid off before we can start rebuilding credit. We actually start the very day we file the proposal. We will start rebuilding credit. That typically takes 2 to 3 years to get somebody's beacon score back up to an average, which would be about a 650. And that in time will be your friends in credit rebuilding.
Right, I see. And actually, I learned through a friend of mine that not paying your phone bill on time, so your mobility phone bill on time, can really affect your credit rating.
So there's something ironic there. Phone companies don't report when you do pay on time,
Right.
because that's not a debt, right? That's just a utility bill or a monthly payment. So, but they can report you as delinquent when you don't pay on time. So definitely that would affect somebody's credit score if they don't pay their FIDO bill on time. Absolutely.
Right. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you and I haven't covered that you feel is really important that people should know?
There's the stages of our relationship with our clients is threefold. The first is debt restructuring, which is talking about what options are available. The second is credit rebuilding, which we just discussed. And then the third one is something called our aftercare program. And we talked about it, I think, at the beginning of our conversation about financial literacy and having the resources to understand, how did I get in trouble in the first place? Why did I accept that pre-approved Visa card when I was just getting out of university, and then, you know, thought I was being recognized for getting my education and going out of the work world. And then, of course, 20 years later, it's not $1,000 limit; it's now up to a $30,000 limit, and I'm at that limit. You know, so how did I get there? Banks are very good at helping us get into debt, but they're not very good at helping us get out of debt. That's a whole educational process. So these are courses that our clients actually take. It's all for the same, in the same package, that come to their inbox, and they can sit on their computer. Of course, it's optional. They can. And what we try to do is rehabilitate our clients. We're not interested in repeat business. We're interested in referral business, but not repeat business. So hopefully we get our clients' financial feedback underneath them and educate them as to how, they may have gotten into trouble in the first place, and then send them back out into the credit world, knowing full well how to stay in control of their finances.
And can anyone take these courses? Like, could I go to your website and sign up and take the online course, or do I have to be one of your clients?
You need to be a 4 Pillars client, yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very, very much for joining me today. And I'm wondering if you can let people know where we can find you or get in touch with you if I need to send people out my door and to yours.
So we have my own personal website, which is chrisgrew.ca. So people can reach out to me there. My email address is chrisg@4pillars.ca. On my phone number is 250-880-1618. So you can call me on the phone or send me a text, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.